I'm Julie Zenner along with Dennis Anderson, and here's what's coming up on Almanac North.
Well, the past year has been a good one for Minnesota's mining industry, but news of the spring idling of North Shore mining brings up some long-term concerns.
We'll have a video report on the young swimmer who wore a Black Lives Matter swimsuit and was nearly barred from a swim competition.
And Danielle Kaeding from Wisconsin Public Radio is our guest on Voices of the Region.
These stories and more coming up on Almanac North. Hello and welcome to Almanac North. Thanks for watching. And Denny, it's good to be back in the studio together after a couple of weeks off due to some COVID restrictions.
Hopefully the pandemic is waning.
I hope so.
I think it is.
Good to have you here, my friend.
Good to be back.
All
Thank
right,
you.
let's begin with the headlines.
All right, thank you very much, Julie. Well, after the legislature failed to act on time, new federal and state legislative districts were released this week by a special court panel. Redistricting is required by law every 10 years to ensure equal representation of voters based on the 10-year census. The 8th Congressional District grew further west with redistricting and now includes Bemidji and all of Minnesota's tribal reservations.
Minnesota Congressman Jim Hagedorn, a Republican who represents the 1st District in southern Minnesota, has passed away. The 59-year-old Hagedorn died after a lengthy battle with kidney cancer, his wife announced Friday on Facebook. Hagedorn's Republican colleagues lauded him for representing the 1st District with unwavering passion and unshakable joy.
The Biden administration announced on Thursday that $1 billion from the bipartisan infrastructure law will go towards Great Lakes restoration projects. The money will help address areas of concern around the Great Lakes, including the St. Louis River along the Minnesota-Wisconsin border. The Environmental Protection Agency expects the St. Louis River project will be completed by 2030.
And there will be no Olympic medal this year in curling for the John Schuster rink of Duluth. Schuster and his teammates lost in the bronze medal game to Canada early Friday morning in Beijing, China. Schuster brought home the gold at the 2018 Winter Olympics in Korea.
Northern Minnesota's mining industry has fared well in recent years despite the pandemic, but that will change this spring when North Shore mining in Babbitt and Silver Bay is idled. Now, in making that announcement, Cleveland Cliffs CEO said it was mainly due to ridiculously high royalty rates. Here to talk about that and other mining news is Tony Barrett, economics professor emeritus from the College of St. Scholastica. Good to see you again, Tony. Thanks for being here tonight.
Always good to be here.
Well, as we mentioned, Cleveland Cliffs is going to idle North Shore mining and it's nearly 600 workers up there, and that's going to happen this spring. What impact is that going to have on the local economy?
Nothing good. I mean, these mining jobs are so good. I mean, these are really nice paying jobs in rural Minnesota. And all of a sudden you're wiping out 300, 400 of those jobs. It's going to have a significant impact.
Now, the mining industry did do quite well during the pandemic. Yes. Is there a flip-flop now on the horizon for all mining areas?
Let's work backwards. The economy's going to do well this year. The steel companies will be doing well this year. Then you get down to the people who need the ore. And even with Cliffs, we've seen how they've expanded. They're now the biggest flat-rolled steel company in America, but they're also one of the biggest processors of scrap. And we're starting to see a movement of less reliance necessarily on ore. Now, nothing earth-shattering, nothing that's going to happen in a generation. But with Cliffs, what you're seeing with this North Shore situation, I see more a question of a corporate reallocation of their resources since they took over the Minorca mine with their purchase of ArcelorMittal.
Right.
I think they're sensing they might have a redundant excess capacity there, and this is an out.
Could you explain the dispute over royalties
Yes.
that we mentioned in the introduction? Because I think that a lot of people don't really understand what that is and what it means for the company.
For some reason, back in 1961, ownership of the mine was transferred to a trust, the Mesabi Trust, which will last for 21 years after the death of 25 people who were listed in the initial document. And I'm not quite sure what their relationship was because most of them were children. They're younger than me. There are a couple who are older than me, and I'm 70. So this is going to last for a while. And all this is it takes the royalty payment and it transfers it to owners of the trust, which is not necessarily those 25 people. You and I can buy shares in Masabi Trust. They were $30 a share. After this announcement, they dropped to $21 a share. And all that company does is take the royalties from the Cleveland Cliffs and transfers it to the stockholders. As for them being ridiculously high, the formula really hasn't changed. What's happened is taconite prices, iron ore prices, which is the biggest determinant of the royalties, have really gone up this year with all the other commodity prices we've seen.
Mm-hmm. So does it make sense from a business standpoint for Cliffs to move its DRI over to Menorca where it doesn't have to pay these royalties? I read somewhere that they were in the neighborhood of $20 million in the fourth quarter of 2021.
It certainly makes business sense. Mm-hmm. You know, I don't want to take sides, but Cleveland Cliffs has been a huge success story. And they've been a success story because of their CEO who plays hardball.
Yeah.
This is a perfect example of it. That 30 years ago, who would have heard of Cleveland Cliffs? Very few people in this area. And now we have the #1 flat-rolled steel company and scrap producer.
I'm glad you brought that up because Cliffs had a record profit of $3 billion in 2021 on a record revenue of $20.5 billion. Are they going to continue to grow?
Yes, for a while.
For a while.
You know, our economy did great in 2021, and that means the demand for steel. But what's happening is the steel companies seem to be repeating their past process of adding capacity. Nucor, Steel Dynamics, and U.S. Steel are all adding new steel mills this year. And you don't add just a little bit of steel capacity. You build one of these mills.
Sure.
You have a lot of capacity. So I would suspect towards the end of the year, as our economy slows down a bit from last year's rapid pace, and with this new capacity, that might not be so great in 2023.
We have less than a minute, but let's get to non-ferrous real quick. DNR decided to stop working on Twin Metals environmental review after the Biden administration pulled the federal mineral leases. What does that mean for this project and for
the copper and nickel is going to be in the ground for years, and someday the price will keep going up. And it's like polymet. I think that's been 17 years since it was first proposed. That copper and nickel's just becoming worth more and more. I don't say it's inevitable that we're going to mine those someday, but that's the process. There's a real incentive to exploit these resources, and the environmentalists will fight it.
And with that, Tony, we have to cut it short. Tony Barrett, Professor Emeritus from the College of St. Scholastica. Thanks, Tony.
My pleasure.
Good to have you here. One young swimmer made more than a splash at a local swim meet when she was nearly disqualified for wearing a suit that read Black Lives Matter on it. Since the meet, her story has garnered national attention, with some of her supporters, including LeBron James and Olympic gold medalist swimmer Simone Manuel. Producer Megan McGarvey dove into the story this week.
This year I decided to go with swimming because I wanted to learn something new. I wanted to show support to Amir Locke and that I matter and that we matter. I thought it was a great idea to wear the swimsuit, and I was super excited to wear it. So I get all my stuff ready, we warm up and get all muscles pumped out. I wore the suit on my first event, and everything went well. Then I went to my coach because they came to me so I could get ready for my next event, and they told me I couldn't wear the swimsuit, and I had a spare swimsuit, but I wasn't gonna change it, so I told my mom. My mom went to my coach, and my coach was like, it wasn't me, it was the official. So my mom went to talk to the official, and the official was like, it's political. You have to take it off, and I was like, nope, a big fat no.
I got the call, and Within minutes, I'm like, don't leave, because Lady and Sarah were about to leave. They were so upset. I said, do not leave. I will be there. Give me 15 minutes. There's no way I'm missing this opportunity to defend this Black girl in this school. So I went and got on the phone with my team. And I was like, hey, I know this is last minute. We need to be here. Call everyone. We need to show up.
I felt great. I felt loved. I felt respected, and I felt honored. And I was super happy that they showed support for me.
So when I got to the meet, they didn't stop the meet. They didn't say like, hey, we need to figure out what's going on before we continue it. Lady was missing races.
I felt like other kids get this chance of like going to state, but it's unfair that I won't get to be able to go to state because they disqualified me from everything.
So as soon as somebody saw the disqualification slip, my staff were like on the phone with the state, how can we overturn this? What's the rules? And that happened immediately. They did the right thing immediately. It just takes a little bit of time, as you can imagine, to sort through and make sure, okay, we're again, we're gonna argue with this official's attempted ruling and make sure that this student can swim. So it wouldn't be something that would be visible to the general public because a lot of it's people are just immediately getting on the phone.
I walked right into the swim room and I confronted the official. And originally I talked to both of the officials, the one official that disqualified Lady, and then I also talked to a few other because they did not want to have a conversation about this. And I just wanted them to know how serious I was, that we had backup coming. I got there within like 10 to 15 minutes. So I wanted her to know not only did I have backup coming, but we were ready to stop this meet until the right thing would be done.
So the director and Classy from the NAACP made a decision and brought in a new official, so I was able to swim.
The officials were all volunteers. They're all volunteers of the Y, but they're all volunteers. Their actions of those officials did not reflect what YMCA stands for and stood for that day.
After everything happened, I mentally prepared myself by like warming up and saying that everything is solved, everything is gonna go good, now focus on swimming.
So the historical context of like racism and swimming, it stems back all the way to the 1950s and the 1960s when we were fighting for our civil liberties. We can go back to St. Augustine when we were protesting how we weren't allowed to swim in the same swimming pool. So a group of people, Black activists and 16 rabbis, actually jumped in this pool in St. Augustine at this motel, and the motel owner threw acid in the pool during that time. And seeing that disrupt the country. It's always been outrageous acts of racism and hate that has pushed people to do something. And while it's helpful, nobody should have to experience that.
Not all communities have had equal and equitable access to pools, to swim lesson instruction, and we're really committed to working hand in hand with community members and community organizations to ensure that every child and every individual has access to knowing how to swim and feels very safe around water, especially here in Duluth, where we're on the shores of Lake Superior. We look forward to continuing to work with and learn from our BIPOC community to make sure that we're eradicating any possible barriers to access. And that means that includes everything from making sure that folks have swim caps that work for them to making sure that folks know how to access YMCA swim lessons and life-saving skills as well.
We like to memorialize these like really good wins, right? Like this was a feel good, like Lady got all the support she needed, but we also need to do the wraparound services of fighting racism, being active, being vocal.
All the work that we do centers around inclusion, justice, equity, and diversity. And we're so proud to do this work in a number of ways, whether that's team book reads, whether that's partnering in the community with a variety of organizations, whether that's our own work to educate ourselves and to work to educate our members about justice and equity. It's central to who we are and to what we do. And we're going to continue listening, and we're going to continue learning, and we're going to continue advocating.
A lot of these groups, and I'm not just talking about the YMCA, I'm just talking about these entities in Duluth, that they're like, well, we're a school, we'll focus on education. We're a gym, we'll focus on health and well-being. We're a jail will focus on criminal justice. But they don't realize that they all intertwine. They're all intersectional. We have to be on the forefront of fighting racism in every aspect of our life.
The dedication to the ongoing work and the ongoing learning and the ongoing advocacy is what truly changes systems and changes the world.
This situation has made me stronger. It has made me happy that people are realizing that we matter. And I feel empowered, really empowered.
After the disqualification was overturned, Lady was able to swim in the rest of the meet and ultimately qualified for state. She will be swimming this weekend in the Twin Cities.
Joining us now with some historical context on this story is Robin Washington, a civil rights documentarian who produced the acclaimed documentary, You Don't Have to Ride Jim Crow. Welcome, Robin. Thank you very much for being here. Nice to see you again.
Thanks for having me.
Why do you think, Robin, this story garnered so much national attention?
Well, people think it can't happen here, it doesn't happen. It goes back, unfortunately, to George Floyd. There are certain things that just give a wake-up call, and yeah, it did happen. And what could be more demonstrative? You saw the shirt, the outfit, and you see the young lady, and to commend her. We're starting with a happy ending, by the way. You said she's made it to state and everything. Isn't that great? We should stop right here.
Why do you think it gathered all that attention?
Well, on the other part is that with NAACP and Classy Dudley, of course, they stepped up. So, they brought the attention there. It wouldn't just have happened, by the way, if people didn't help midwife it. So.
Talk a little bit about the history of swimming pools as the battlegrounds for civil rights.
Battleground.
One of the battlegrounds.
Right, and the piece mentions St. Augustine, but you can go way back before that. You can go back to, emancipation and turn back immediately of Reconstruction. And I don't know how far back swimming pools go, but I know we had hot springs all over the place. But there's no end. If you just, if you want to go to Google Books and put in statute and put in the word Negro or octoroon or something like that, I guarantee, and you put in swimming, you will find tons of state laws about it. That's in the South, and it's not just in the South. By the way, there are other state laws that even if they didn't cover swimming pools specifically, there were prohibited gatherings of any number of blacks and whites together. You couldn't play baseball together. I did a story on baseball and had that.
Robin, historically, the civil rights movement dates back to the 1950s, 1960s, but in reality, it's still underway, isn't it?
Well, yes, that's the point. We're still doing this. And what I was going to very quickly say is not just the South, it's the North. And in 1949 in St. Louis, the largest pool in the country integrated. They said, okay, it's time to integrate. It ended up with an attack of 300 whites on the black swimmers there. They ended up closing the pool. So, no, this has gone on for a long time. A little personal history, It's not just in pools, it's lakes like Lake Superior and Lake Michigan. In Chicago in 1919, the terrible riot, the race riot in Chicago at that time started when a young black man swam into a whites-only beach. There's not supposed to be such a thing in Chicago, but it was, and it ended up in great death and destruction. 40 years later, I participated as a 3-year-old in a wade-in at Rainbow Beach on the south side of Chicago fighting the same battle.
Really?
So you said, do these things change? Unfortunately, it takes a long time.
It does.
Do you think that terrible history of keeping people of color out of public swimming pools, is that a fair comparison to what recently happened in Superior?
Well, how fair do you want? People interview me all the time and they say, what's it like growing up black and Jewish as I am? And well, I only have one reality. And if I could change it someday and I could experience, something else, I could come back and say, oh, well, I just had the control group and yeah, I've been discriminated against. Look, this young lady, was just trying to swim.
Do you think it was more about the BLM message, or was it about the individual of her being a person of color? If she had been the same person asked to change out of a Blue Lives Matter swimsuit, would the same response have come about?
I don't think you want to get into the what ifs. This is what happened.
Yeah.
And so I can't get into the minds of the people who are responsible. I will say, however, for the woman who enforced this or came up with this decision or whatever, I hope there's some outreach to her to turn her into an ally, not just to rake her over the coals. Yes, she did do something that was not really appropriate. And forget about, by the way, whether it's black or blue or whatever, you're talking about a child.
Yeah.
Okay, so, there are ways to, if there is an issue, discuss it with the child or do something with the child without being draconian.
And Robin, with that, we have to hang it up. Time goes quickly here. So thank you very much for being here tonight.
As always, thank you.
Thank you. It's time now for Voices of the Region. Each week we hear from a journalist covering stories of interest in the Northland. This week our reporter is Danielle Kaeding from Wisconsin Public Radio.
Just last week, a federal judge in California struck down the Trump administration's decision back in late 2020 to delist the wolf. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service removed protections for gray wolves throughout most of the country. And, they were able to be hunted as of January 4th last year. And now with this ruling, basically, most gray wolves across the country are placed back on the endangered species list. And what that means here in Wisconsin and also Minnesota and Michigan is that, they can no longer have wolf hunts or issue permits for landowners to harvest problem wolves or take care of problem wolves. That is something that has been happening in the last year. Of course, Minnesota and Michigan didn't hold wolf hunts, but Wisconsin did after a court-ordered decision last winter, which really stirred up a lot of controversy in Wisconsin surrounding wolf management when hunters killed 218 wolves in less than 72 hours. People who were against the wolf hunt are celebrating this move and saying it gives, it allows state natural resource officials the time they need to develop a plan to properly manage wolves, and that we're not making any hasty decisions regarding any kind of hunts that might be held. Whereas hunters and farmers are frustrated because, especially in northern Wisconsin, they're encountering conflicts with wolves. They're depredating cattle or pets in some instances. And so it removes another tool for them to be able to manage that population where problems are occurring. On Enbridge's Line 5 oil and gas pipeline, there was a recent public hearing that was held at the beginning of February where hundreds of people attended a 10-hour-long virtual public hearing to voice their opinions on the state's draft environmental review of the $450 million plan to reroute Line 5 across northern Wisconsin south of the Bad River Reservation. And that's happening because Enbridge wants to move that pipeline after the Bad River tribe sued the company in 2019 to shut down and remove the pipeline from its tribal lands. And so now Enbridge is proposing this new 30-inch pipeline that's expected to cross nearly 200 water bodies and around 135 acres of wetlands. And there were some really strong opinions related to this project. Most people who spoke during that hearing spoke in opposition to the reroute. Then there was also people who spoke in favor of the project, basically touting things that Enbridge has said, that this is a vital energy link for the region, that we depend on the oil and gas in this pipeline to heat our homes, that it would create 700 construction jobs, and that it would have a $135 million economic impact for the state, as well as generate, more than $36 million in property tax revenues. Recently, the Superior City Council approved a plan for how to spend $17 million in state and local federal recovery funds that were made available through the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA, as it's more widely known. And so what they've done is they've basically set out a list of priorities that they're going to fund, and some of the bigger ticket items were related to historic rehabilitation. I believe there's somewhere around $3.5 million, I think, now for historic rehabilitation in Superior. The biggest ticket item was $5 million for Connect Superior, which is the city's broadband initiative. And they're also putting around $2 million towards law enforcement for police vehicles, body and squad cameras and stun guns, and also a new proposal to address childcare and expand access to either infant care or additional childcare facilities or operators in the city. After there was an instance that came up where one childcare provider is at risk of closing down or being evicted, putting, I believe it's 11 families at risk of losing their childcare.
Oh, we're out of time, but you can keep up with our show by following Almanac North on Facebook and Twitter. Bookmark the WDSE website for program updates, news about the station and upcoming events, and to download the PBS video app to watch your favorite PBS programs anytime you'd like. And Denny, February is winding down, but the winter weather doesn't seem to be going away anytime soon.
Not yet. We had more snow today and plenty of wind. If you like wind, this is your day.
Lots of wind. I like wind, but I don't like it when I have to go across the bridge, which I have to do tonight.
I agree with you. Be careful.
All right. Well, thanks to our guests and to the crew here in the studio. With Dennis Anderson, I'm Julie Zenner. Stay warm, everyone. We'll see you next time.